So next up, we have Shira Harris and Anna Hisnanick. We have quite a long title. Friend of Dorothy, Women in Baseball as a Motif for Creating Queer Spaces, Beauty and Joy in the AAGPBL and a League of Their Own. So Shira and Anna, floor is yours. Saw Shira. I just call Anne, sorry. Keep calling you Anna.
Good morning. Can everyone see my screen? Great. All right. There we go. Anna, you can start us off.
Yeah, all right. Good morning. I'm Anna Hisnanick. And yeah, today we're going to be presenting on women in baseball and the motif for creating queer spaces, specifically around joy. And I'll let Shira introduce herself as well.
Great. Great. So I'm Shira. I'm based in New York. I am a teacher at a deaf school and a fan of A League of Their Own. And that was sort of how I came to the women in baseball world. That's how Anna and I have met. And we have started doing some research to just keep track of and remember what's happened in the past year, basically, of since the A League of Their Own TV show in 2022 was released, and how that connects back to the movie, the league, and what it represents specifically for queer women.
All right, so we can go ahead and shift to the next slide. Great, so just a quick timeline to get folks all on the same page. So we had the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and then in 1992, Penny Marshall created the film A League of Their Own, starring, had a really stacked cast, Gina Davis, Madonna, Rosie O'Donnell, among others. And then Abby Jacobson and Will Graham created a show by the same name, A League of Their Own, that premiered in 2022. And it was really looking at the 1992 film and thinking about what stories could be expanded on, what stories weren't included in that film, and really kind of reimagining that 1992 film with Penny Marshall's blessing. And so we're here to kind of talk about the show and the parallels between the show and the league and the fan base. So throughout the show, there's this motif of creation and of creating beautiful things and creating joy. So one of the main characters, Carson, creates these game cards. She keeps track of all the plays and the players and how, what their batting stats are and that kind of thing. And she's paying really close attention to the players that on the other teams that the Rockford Peaches play against. And then another character, Clance, draws comics and gets them published in the newspaper, and it's very much a way for her to connect with her husband, who is sent off to war, but then also just as a way to kind of express herself and connect with. There's a group of youth as well, and that's a connection point for her to like the local community. Bert tailors suits, and so for him, it's very much a way of creating space to be authentically himself and help others see themselves as in their own authentic self and be able to like feel good as themselves. Maybelle knits, and so you see her periodically knitting throughout the show for her children, who are alluded to throughout the show, and really and for her it's really kind of a way to to create things for younger people in her life, that kind of thing. And then we have community spaces as well. So creation of space and creation of like intentional space. So the Peaches house, where all of the team lives, it's a boarding house style space. Each of them has a roommate, right? And we see a lot of sort of organic interaction in that house space. One of the things that I really love about the Peaches house is that if you look closely as you're watching the show, there's always kind of like a half-eaten sandwich sitting on a counter, or like, you know, like it always feels very lived in the show. And then community at the factory as well. So really, once the factory started employing women, you'll see that there's very close ties. You'll see folks recognize each other from other spaces as well in that factory space. So like we live in community and now we also work together. And then both the gay bar that's featured, as well as the house parties that happen in the show, are also a space for specifically queer community. And there's like a little bit of a secretiveness to it, a little bit of this is a special set aside space for folks who identify within the LGBTQ community to come together at a time when that was not really very permissible.
All right, so just going back to the show, we created this quick timeline of basically the past year since the show was released, August 12th of 2022, up until August 18th of 2023, just about a month ago. So this is just an overview for those of you who have not seen the show or not been following like the news of what's happened since the show has been released. It was released to great reviews. A huge fan base immediately established themselves on various social media platforms, started gathering and connecting with each other. You'll see that September, October, November, January, there were all of these, and December and January, there were all of these awards that were given to the show, whether nominations or wins, including the GLAAD Award for media for the Outstanding New TV Series, which is a huge award. And as well as in December of 2022, a lot of news sources are releasing their best of 2022 lists. For example, you know, what are the 10 best shows that were released throughout the year. And there were nearly 100 different news sources that chose to include A League of Their Own on Best of 2022. And so then what you're seeing is that there is all of this support. And then in March, we found out that Amazon Prime had renewed it for 4 episodes, which was later confirmed in April by Prime Video. In between that, of course, it won the GLAAD Award. And then recently, just in August, Prime Video decided to pull the programming for the future season. So they decided that there will not be a season 2. They cited the writers and actors strike, which isn't really connected to whether the show was renewed. But they did choose to let go of the show. And so what we want to talk about here is like what's happened in the past year, and then how that's impacted people and why it matters that the show continues on because of what we've seen from the past year. So similarly to how in the show we're seeing a series of creations, what we noticed was that there were like 5 categories that we could divide up of the ways that fans created something. So these are the 5 categories: visual art, fan fiction, virtual community, the fan campaign, and meetups. So now I'm just going to go through each one and talk a little bit about them. So first, visual art. So this is like a just quick collage of a small percentage of some of the beautiful, incredible visual art that's been created. So you can see all of the characters represented. Some of these are just sketches. People are using technology. Some of them are like, people tend to just do these drawings, these create these pieces of art, and then share them on social media. Some folks are selling their art. A lot of this has just been people choosing to express how impactful these characters are, how impactful this story is, through showing pictures of scenes or characters in art. Then we wanted to talk a bit about the fan campaign. So particularly over Twitter, we've been working on daily, like a daily power hour, which is basically recruiting people to post about the show, use a particular tag, and see how far the reach can be. So when Twitter says that it's trending, which you can see this image of. So below we have just a little graph compiled by the person who's been in charge of the fan campaign. And here we have the months from August through March and some tweet statistics. So you can see just especially November through January, how we were just continuing to increase engagement. And then in March, with all of the news between the GLAAD Awards and the 4-episode renewal, there was just a huge increase on Twitter. This picture on the top right here that says Renew a League of Their Own, #more4, is actually a picture of a plane that had a banner that fans got together and had a plane fly over the Amazon Prime Video headquarters in LA right after they had announced the 4 episodes. So this was something that you'll find in a lot of articles about fans. To the left is just a visual compilation of the first few awards that were won from the team. And so it's another thing that a lot of fans have done is just create images, visuals to continue sharing, continue engagement, and continue showing the impact that the show has had. Next, we have this virtual community. So this is a picture of a communal map that was shared throughout social media. The premise is that people could see the map and choose to add themselves and their location, country, state, city, if they identified as an A League of Their Own fan. You can see that there actually are fans across the 6 continents. There were over 800 people who self-selected to put themselves on this map. And what we found when you can actually go through the map and see where people are is that there were at least 10 people who had put themselves on the map in places where it is actually illegal to be an LGBTQ person. So the show is important outside of just the United States, or in other places where there are safe places to be a queer person. Outside of that, you can see that there are people who are finding the show as a place of safety that they don't necessarily have where they live. Then just 2 more, we have our meetups. So in the spring, Darcy Carden, who's one of the actors who was in A League of Their Own, was in a Broadway play, and fans took to New York to see the play. So this is one of the, these are 2 pictures of meetups. The one on the left is in New York before the closing weekend of her play in June. And then the one on the right was in DC, I believe, in June or July to go see a comedy show that she was in. And over the course of the play's run, which was about 12 weeks, hundreds and hundreds of people came to New York to see the show, but also to gather and connect with other fans. Lastly is the fan fiction, which as of last night, there were 1,643 independent works of fan fiction written based on the show. And these are specifically people who are writing stories based on these characters, expanding the story, and creating something for themselves and for others to read. And these can be hundreds and hundreds of pages if you were to print them out. And it's really become a big connector in the community of talking about like what people think is happening next, what they think these characters' backgrounds are, and all of that.
Great. Yeah, so as we can kind of see in the show, we're creating a lot of physical artifacts, creating a lot of community, in the fan base, creating a lot of physical artifacts, creating a lot of community. And so why does this matter? So social identity theory, which is a sociological theory born out of the 1970s, and since then there's been several researchers who've kind of expanded upon and taken it in different directions, but the premise of social identity theory is really an individual's sense of who they are based on their group memberships. And so if we take that, looking at A League of Their Own, so the show, the 2022 show, portrays characters that are relatable in their nuance. So there's these complex characters that are a part of the show, and fans of the show identify with those characters and the characters' experiences. So representation. So we see characters who are coming into their LGBTQ identity late in life. We're seeing characters who are going through journeys with their gender identity and gender expression. And so that representation, fans are really identifying with. We're seeing characters that are included or excluded because of different identities, and that in and of itself lends to a lot of representation. People feel really connected to that experience. And then from that, fans, as well as the characters on the show, like seek out others who have that similar experience, right? So that social identity. For the women who went and tried out for the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, for a lot of them, that was the first time they were really in a space with a lot of women who played baseball from all over the country, from different countries, right? And so the fan base traveled to New York, traveled to DC, has had meetups has had regional meetups because of this social identity, because of this connectedness to feeling like a part of something bigger than themselves. And then a little bit more of kind of the why. So the impact of media. So Autostraddle is just one source, as well as GLAAD. But according to Autostraddle's database, queer inclusive show cancellations, about 20% of the shows from their database are canceled after one season, which is really significant because a lot of times LGBTQ folks really get invested in a show, see themselves, see that representation, and then when they're canceled after one season, it can feel much more personal in that way. And then according to the GLAAD TV report, the most recent one, the 2023 report, there's been an overall decrease. It's slight. It's a slight decrease, but an overall decrease in LGBTQ characters on screen between the 21-22 report and the 22-23 report. There's also data here from the Amazon Prime. Yes, from Amazon Prime here. So counted 43 characters in a scripted original series. And so really just thinking about how important it is to have that LGBTQ representation in media, and specifically representation of queer women and non-binary individuals, and how it's often really challenging to find that in a sustainable way through the media. So
great. And then just to add one thing that's not specifically on this slide, but there has been a significant amount of research that shows that when queer people and in general minority groups are represented in the media, there is a decrease in violence and hate crimes against them. So that's not specifically in these two reports, but just further emphasizing the importance of representation. And then what we're seeing from this image on the right of the Prime had 43 LGBTQ characters from the 2021-2022 season in their on the Prime video selection. Then they're saying, you know, we can't wait to see what future seasons have. So obviously, with the show as it stands right now, not having future seasons, there won't be more characters added, and at least about 15 of the characters in A League of Their Own are included in that 43 number. So that's going to be a huge decrease when there are not new characters added to that. So that's going to go down to below 30. So that wraps up our presentation. So we're happy to take any questions. Thank you all so much for coming and listening. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and also that you take a look at some fictional women playing baseball.
All right. See, do we have any questions? Or it looks like it's just a lot about the campaign. Let's see, some good acclaim. Okay. What's the likelihood of the show finishing as planned?
I am not sure that that's a question that we can answer. So I know that now that the writers' strike has concluded, they are talking to other networks about seeing if they can pick it up for a full second season, possibly more. I don't know what the status of those conversations are, but hopefully that will end well for all of us.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but we've all got our fingers crossed as well. So
yeah. Let's see, any other more acclaim?
It looks like Donna's got a question.
Oh, okay, Donna, sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the hand raising.
Yeah, you get like 90 boxes here, you know.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like perhaps jumping up and down or something. Loved your presentation. Since we're all doing research into perception and discourse and stuff like that, and since in some parts of the country we're living in really conservative times, I'm wondering about whether there's been pushback to this or other representations, because as I said, I found like when Pearl tried to cover sports, it was like, no, we can't have a woman doing this. So with LGBTQ characters in states where it's like, we don't even discuss them and we take the books out of libraries, how do you negotiate that?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I think
and I wasn't expecting the definitive answer. It was just more kind of musing that we as researchers and people who represent are grappling with this, like how best to present even the topic in a world that's saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know the show did get, well, you know, for all of its praise, like did get a fair bit of negative.
So there were critics that just buried it without even watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so someone mentioned this in the chat. So shortly after the first episode dropped, and even beforehand, there was an effort by a group of people to what they call review bomb, which means give 1-star reviews and trash the show and the premise of including LGBTQ people and the focus of Black women in the story and people of color, and just to slam the show to prevent any good reviews. So if you actually search, there are some articles from right after the show came out in August that the A League of Their Own fans literally within 24 hours of the show being released were responding to those comments and then creating so many more positive reviews just to counterbalance what had been given what people had left there, then people were trying to respond to that. And I think that the fan response, part of the reason that it's been so strong is to try to counterbalance the negative response that the show has gotten, which has been significantly smaller than the positive response, but as is often the case, can sometimes feel louder.
Yeah, I often wonder if the people at the top are just more conservative and are honestly afraid more of the louder negative voices who may have money than, you know, what people are actually saying who actually watch it. But yeah, yeah, essentially someone said the same thing. Ryan said people complained about the show being woke, they had never seen it. Review bombing. Yeah. Adam Korengold asked if he could include the visualizations in his talk tomorrow. If you guys can discuss that privately. Bobby has a long comment here. I don't necessarily want to read it, but you can read it. Oh, Kat says Jen Salter, head of Amazon Video, was a huge supporter of the show. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, there has been a great amount of support from several of the Prime Video executives. They did decide to do some focus groups, which there was also sort of a large expose article released in, I believe, February or March, about these focus groups that were supposed to be representative of the viewers of Prime Video TV. And what the focus group said was that seeing LGBTQ people represented was horribly off-putting, and that as a result of that, that sort of influenced the types of work that Prime Video wanted to share. That said, we do have on good authority that several of the executives at Prime Video were huge supporters of A League of Their Own. That doesn't necessarily mean that that is enough to continue a show going just because of a few people who are very supportive, but we heard that Jen Salter was very supportive, in addition to several others.
The 20% figure, is that typical? Or, I mean, I didn't know necessarily how it compared to, you know, other platforms or, you know, other programs. Do you know?
Are you referring to the cancellation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think so it's based on, so Autostraddle has a database of like 780 or so shows that they pulled that number from. So I think that I would need to look into kind of what the average across the industry in terms of cancellations after one season are. I think I couldn't tell you for sure if it's higher, but yeah, but that number surprised me. It felt high, but again, I would need to kind of look into across sort of the media industry how many things get canceled after one show, like how many. Yeah, so it's a good question.
All right, I'll get one more in here and then we'll jump to the next panel. Because Sue Macy just wrote, do you think the approachability of producer Will Grant on Twitter X was unusual? How did that contribute to the development of the League of Their Own fandom?
We love Will Graham.
We love Will. We love Will Graham.
Will has been incredibly supportive of all of the fans, and as this comment says, very approachable. I can say that, like, on a personal level, it has really increased our desire to, like, continue fighting for the show when we're getting the feedback of, like, there are people listening and, you know, this is working in some capacity. And in addition to just like the general support of, like, we're saying this show meant so much to us, there, you know, there were so many things that came out of the show that benefited us that are outside of just the show. And then to be able to share that with the people who created it has been really impactful. Anna.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think overall the approachability of not only, you know, Will, but the actors, you know, throughout the show as a whole has been, I would say, unusual. This is kind of my first foray into fandoms of things, being a big fan of you know, a piece of media. And so you know, everyone has been really approachable and welcoming, and it's been that in and of itself has like made, I think, created this sort of investment in this buy-in, sort of beyond what the intrinsic motivation. Like there's now this, we know that we're being seen and heard, and that's really powerful. So.
All right, well, thank you very much, Shira and Anna.